Handoff, Damian Williams trying to get to the edge, breaks a tackle, 35, 30, Damian Williams, 20, stays in bounds, 15, 10, 5, touchdown, Kansas City. Damian Williams runs to immortality and will be remembered forever in the Chiefs' kingdom.
Tiamu stays on his feet, and he whistles one complete for a first down to Alonzo Russell.
Good snap, good place. The kick is up. It is long enough, and it is a Missouri winner. The thicker kicker connects.
I had no doubt. He's nails in practice. He's been nails all day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the ShowMeFootball.com podcast. I am joined by Conor. As always, Conor, say what's up.
What up?
So we're going to be discussing the biggest takeaways from Chiefs preseason game number 1 versus the 49ers. I actually did not watch the game live. I just got back from vacation in Florida, slight flex, and I only caught a little bit of the game through highlights on YouTube and Twitter, just seeing people talk about the game and stuff and who stood out, watching little clips here and there. So I have limited knowledge about the game, but I know Conor caught some of it. I have some knowledge built up, like I said, through the YouTube highlights and Twitter and stuff. So we're just going to go ahead and give our biggest takeaways from the game. You can't put too much stock into anything that we say, though, because it's week 1 of preseason, but the Chiefs beat the 49ers 19-16. It was a nice little comeback win at the end there with the backups in the game. But Conor, I'm going to let you go first and talk about some of the things that stood out to you.
Well, there were a couple players that stood out to me as like, oh, shoot, we might have something in this guy. There were a couple players that it was kind of same shit, different day. And I'll start with that player, Machole Hardman. Really simple route, short route, and it just bounces off his hands and almost gets picked off by a linebacker. And I don't recall Machole doing anything else that game. So yeah, so much for being a complete receiver.
Well, I did say on Twitter during the game when it was going on that I don't want to overreact to one play in week 1 of preseason.
Well, it was a pretty pathetic play.
But yeah, I mean, it should have been caught. Like, come on, Machole. Is this really why everyone was telling us that Machole has taken that step and that we shouldn't have addressed receiver more than we did? Because if so, I'm going to be a little disappointed.
Well, speaking of addressing receiver, for whatever reason, Garrett Dieter was in the depth chart higher than Cornell Powell, but at the end of the game, Shane Buechele led a 2-minute drill to go and win the game, and Cornell Powell was a major part of that, catching 2 passes for 10 yards apiece. And I thought he looked good from what we saw of him. We really didn't see him that much, but I really want to see more of him.
You saw the ability to separate and make contested catches like he did in college. Granted, it was against the backups, but I mean, it's positive. And yeah, the whole Dieter thing, we've been over this. Like, at this point, Dieter, he is what he is. Like, nature should take its course and he should not make the team again. Like, there's too many other guys that have higher upside than Dieter that deserve it, like Darice Fountain, Antonio Callaway, even though you're not high on him and neither am I, but Byron Pringle, like, he's still up there higher than Dieter. It's just like Dieter, that thing has run its course. Okay. Like, Dieter should not make the 53-man roster. And if he does, I'm going to have some questions, but that's not really all that relevant or significant. But I agree with you about Cornell Powell. I thought he looked pretty impressive, making some catches. One of the other rookies that I was slightly disappointed in, Noah Gray. The Chiefs got him a lot of snaps in training camp. They got him quickly integrated into the offense. And then in his limited opportunity, he drops a pass that ends up getting intercepted, even though one of his strengths coming out of college was having sure hands. Now, I will say the ball was thrown a little bit behind him, but looking at the play myself, I just kind of feel like he should have caught that.
Yeah, Yeah, I was expecting Noah Gray to come in and be a really good football player, but I wasn't very happy with his performance at all.
No. Someone that I did mention their name just a second ago that I thought looked pretty impressive, though, was Darice Fountain. He was someone that was with the Colts for a couple of seasons and didn't really work out, and the Chiefs picked him up this offseason. And he looked pretty good. He had 4 receptions for 38 yards and had a kick return rep that was pretty good as well. Fountain, I'm not sure what his outlook is for making the roster, but he does have a pretty good athletic profile. And you know what? I was impressed with him. I think he has a pretty good chance to make the team, if not the practice squad, as a receiver.
I think he's more likely to make the practice squad. If we're talking about bottom of the roster guys who could make it as a receiver, I'm saying Jody Forsten with 3 receptions for 32 yards with an average of 10.7. Finally, Jody Forsten is starting to get some reps and get the love that he deserves. I know we've both been high on him for a while, and I'm really hoping that we finally get to see Jody Forsten make the team.
Yeah, Jody Fortson, if he makes the team, I think it'll be as a tight end. He's kind of been, it's so confusing that like some days he'll be listed as a wide receiver. He'll be used as a wide receiver. Some days he'll be a tight end. You know what, though? I think this might be the year of Jody Fortson. I think we might finally be seeing it. I know he had some circus catches in training camp, and you know, I said once again, I'm not buying into it again. I'm not going to get my heart broken. I don't want this to be another year where Jody Fortson has a great year at camp and we all hype him up and he goes to the practice squad all year. But I think Jody Fortson is finally taking that step and maybe he'll make the roster. And honestly, I always thought that he had enough talent where he should have been on the active roster at times. Like, I know I said I should stop talking about Dieter, but I remember for some of the COVID call-up games last year where they needed someone to fill in the roster, Gary Dieter got all the opportunities. It's like, why? Like, give someone else a shot, like Jody Fortson, who actually we've never seen before, but has that upside. Jody Fortson is a monster. I mean, his catch radius is insane. We saw it last night with the one-handed catch he made, leading that final drive to put the Chiefs ahead. I mean, Jody Fortson is just a monster, and I feel like it would be a crime not to use someone that has that sheer size and catching ability.
Oh, yeah. Like, what can Jody or what can a skinny white guy like Eric Dieter with no speed or no real physical upside whatsoever do that Jody Forsten, just this massive monster of a human being, can't do? You know?
Yeah. And I know one of the knocks on Fortson has been that he's not that fast, and
who cares?
He's not a great blocker, which you want in a tight end if he's going to play tight end. But I think his receiving ability kind of outweighs the whole blocking thing. The Chiefs have guys that can block. I expect them to find a way to keep Blake Bell on roster too, who they like. And then the whole thing about being fast and wanting a special teams gunner, like Jody Fortson forced the fumble in preseason a couple years ago, and his lengthy arms actually helps him to do things like that, which kind of makes up for the lack of speed. So, I mean, at that point, you're just looking for reasons not to have Jody Fortson on roster, which I think is wrong.
I feel like we're missing the key aspect of why Garrett Dieter is on the roster and Jody Forsten is not. Apparently, Jody Forsten did not run the hills with Tyreek.
Yeah, you're right. It's just that Gary Dieter is just that good of friends with everyone. You know what they say? It's not about how good you are. It's about who you know. And Gary
Dieter is the prime example of that.
Yeah, Gary Dieter, he just knows a lot of people. But another positive from last night's game, I will say, is Chris Jones, I thought looked pretty good. He had a sack and then exited the game shortly after that. But I mean, it was pretty awesome to see how easily he was able to get in there and get a sack. They had him play defensive end on the first 2 downs, and then they had him pass rush on 3rd downs, which I think is a pretty good indicator of what their plans are for him. And it kind of catches teams off guard, I think, when you have him be a 2-down guy at defensive end and then have him be in the middle on 3rd down pass rushing snaps. I think that's perfect. I want them to keep him on the inside as much as possible for reasons I stated before. in other videos and podcasts and stuff. But I thought the way they used him was good, and I think it proved to be effective last night. How easily he got a sack, and then also the new look offensive line. I thought impressed on that first drive, and I also think it's evident. I haven't really talked about this with you, but I've talked about it on my own and other videos and stuff. I don't think Trey Smith is giving up the right guard job.
Oh no, I think Trey Smith is a very good football player who's definitely going to lock down that spot. But honestly, the offensive line didn't look bad to me, but it really didn't stand out to me. I saw Arrowhead Live tweet, yeah, Clyde's going to run for 1,000,000 yards this year. Like, what happened in that game that could possibly indicate Clyde's going to have a great season? I guess I missed something, but honestly, I feel like it's a little too early to really say anything about the offensive line, but I'm still optimistic about it.
Like, both things can be true. Like, the offensive line, I think, will help prop up Clyde more than, he got last year, if that makes sense. But the Chiefs just don't run the ball all that much. Now, I've alluded to them maybe running the ball a little bit more this year than they have in years past because of the personnel moves that they've made. If you disagree with that, I don't blame you, but I think it's something that you have to acknowledge given the moves that they made, the additions to the offensive line that they made. I mean, they ran some power last night with the offensive line. Typically, Andy Reid has never run a power run scheme, and I think they brought in the horses to where they feel comfortable running some power, and I think it's just something we're going to see more. I think the Chiefs are going to be more successful in short yardage than they've been in years past, which is good, even though I still want them to pass as much as they do, if not more, just because it really depends on how successful the run game is. I'm just so used to the Chiefs run game being so underwhelming and setting us up on these like unnecessary third and longs that I just don't want them to run the ball at all, especially on those first and second longs up the middle, because they just never worked. Maybe they'll work more now, but I'm still, even then, just not a fan of a run up the middle. So I don't know. We'll see. But I mean, both things can kind of be true. I think Clyde is going to have a good year, better year than he did last year, but I still want them to run the ball. I want them to keep it at a low number.
Here's where I disagree. Jerick McKinnon looked really good yesterday.
Yeah.
And I genuinely want Jerick McKinnon to be RB1. Like, usually I'm a Daryl guy, Daryl the Barrel, but Jerick McKinnon looked really, really good last night. And maybe I'm overreacting, but I just really liked the way he ran and just the way he narrowly avoided tackles. He was just hard to bring down, whereas Clyde is pretty easy to bring down. So yeah, Jerick McKinnon, he's wearing number 1 for a reason.
Well, I mean, we all know that you have a bias against Clyde. But that being said, I am also a Jerick McKinnon truther, and I think he is going to thrive and have somewhat of a career resurgence with the Chiefs. And he just landed in the perfect spot, really, for someone in his position, a new up-and-coming offensive line with one of the best offensive minds in the game. I think Jerick McKinnon's going to have a big year. But that being said, any other big takeaways that you had from last night's game?
Yeah, there were a couple. One that comes to mind immediately is I thought Will Parks did a really good job. It seemed like every play I saw, Will Parks was close to making a play. He was in the area, and that's really all you can ask for a safety. When you think of the best safeties in the league, like Budda Baker, they're always around the ball carrier, like waiting to make a play. And I thought Will Parks did a really good job of that yesterday. And one thing that I got a little attention on that I pointed out was the Chiefs actually got to the quarterback. And yeah, I know it's a preseason game against the Niners backups, but it was just really refreshing to see the Chiefs actually pressuring the quarterback with people other than Chris Jones.
Right.
I think it was like Tim Ward got a couple sacks, which was surprising. I just expected Tim Ward to be like a camp body who got cut. Treshaun Wharton had a good game. He got a sack. I think it was Amari Cobb had a sack and just an overall good game. It was just really refreshing seeing the Chiefs get to the quarterback again.
Yeah, and speaking of quarterbacks, I know there was a lot of hype around Trey Lance, who the Chiefs went up against last night, because he had an 80-yard bomb. And not to downplay Trey Lance's performance or anything, and I think he'll be a decent QB in this league, but let's be honest, the only reason he got that was because UDFA defensive back Devon Key was burnt toast last night.
He should not be on the roster today.
He was just completely out of place.
He was horrible. I felt like I was watching Charvarius Ward.
And that's unfortunate because he's made a lot of plays in training camp from what I've heard. And
Who cares?
One of the UDFAs that people were higher on, but just not a good outing from him.
Yeah, that means literally nothing. All that matters is what you can do on the field. That's why I don't care at all what anybody reports in camp, because the guys who are good in camp usually suck on the field.
Yeah, someone who did have a good game last night as well, though. Well, not in the way that you would expect, but Mike Hughes looked great on kick returns, which was something that was refreshing for me to see, given how atrocious we were on kick returns last year with Machole. And I want Machole to focus on offense and not be a returner anymore, especially because Machole just was a very underwhelming returner. But Mike Hughes was running people over last night in the return game. What did you think about him?
Well, the thing with Mike Hughes is I never expected him in the return game at all. So I was more so surprised, like, really, we're putting this injury-prone cornerback back to return kicks. So that was more so jarring to me than anything. And I don't like Byron Pringle on offense, but I'm still of the belief that Byron Pringle should be the full-time return man and not see the field on offense at all. Oh, but he caught a touchdown pass from.
You don't want to see him on the field at all on offense?
No, I really don't. But he's a good special teamer. So that's what I think his role should be. Kick return, and that's it. Because I think he's good at it. But I don't think he's a threat offensively at all. Yeah, he's made a couple clutch snags, but it's not enough to me.
As you are, like, I still think he's an okay third or fourth receiver. But I do kind of agree with you there about, like, I kind of feel like people overreact to the idea of him being like the wide receiver too, because look, he's been on the team already for 3 years now. Andy Reid has had plenty of opportunities to use him, and he just never really gave him that opportunity. And that's for a reason. Now, I have criticized Reid before for not using players that I thought he should have, but I trust him with Pringle here because look, Pringle is already 28 years old. He was a UDFA to begin with. He has 300 career receiving yards, and people just kind of treat him like this receiver that we think is in the running to have like 800 yards and 6 touchdowns or something like that. I just don't think Pringle really has that in him. I think he's an okay third or fourth receiver, but I think if we're talking about Byron Pringle being the Chiefs wide receiver 2 all year long next year, it'll be a bit of a disappointment.
After the first preseason game, who do you think should be wide receiver number 2?
Oh, that's a good question. Because, I mean, I don't think – look, I've been frustrated with Machole. I really have. But I don't think there's anyone else out there that's like, oh, man, they got to be a wide receiver too instead of Machole. I don't think anyone really took it from him like that. And Machole, although, like I said, I've been frustrated with him. He is a weapon. He'll have his big plays. And I think for that reason – he should be the number 2 wide receiver for right now, but his job could easily be lost.
Screw that. Tyreek, D-Rob, Cornell Powell.
You think it should be D-Rob?
Yes, I'd much rather have D-Rob than Machole.
Wow. Really?
Give me D-Rob 10 times out of 10. I'm tired of Machole.
I would like to see Cornell Powell running with the 1s and 2s the next preseason game to see how he does.
Please, at least have him over Garrick Dieter. I'm so high on Powell.
That's a bit that's a bit of a head scratcher why you wouldn't have Cornell Powell ahead of him. But it is what it is, I guess.
I feel like Cornell Powell's going to get cut.
Nah, no way. They invested in him, and they invested in him pretty high. I mean, he was a lower end draft pick, but I mean, like, that's not someone that you cut. Someone that I think might have trouble making the roster, though, even Joshua Kando.
Well, yeah, like I was talking about earlier, I've made it very clear on the show that I do not think that Josh Kando is very good. And during the game, Tim Ward stepped up and Amari Cobb stepped up. We brought in Alex Okafor to help fill out the defensive end rotation. Taco Charlton's making the roster. It seems pretty tight for Kando. I feel like Kando might end up being a practice squad guy that's just eternally developing.
Yeah, that's kind of where I see things headed. Like, the athleticism and talent is there, but he's just got to get there mentally and learn how to be a pass rusher. And he's just not there yet. And
I'd much rather have Tim Ward over him.
Which is surprising to hear from you.
I made like one comment about Tim Ward. I don't hate the guy.
I do think Tim Ward has a little bit of something. And I know he had a good game in week 17 against the Chargers last year, which I know you can't put too much stock into. You can't put too much stock into the preseason games either. But like, Tim Ward
has shown us more than Josh Kando.
Yeah. So I think Joshua Kando might have trouble making the roster. It might be a practice squad candidate. But anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up?
I've been on record of hating Tommy Townsend, like despising Tommy Townsend, but I can admit that he had a good game. And Harrison Butker missed an extra point.
Oh, we didn't mention that. That's right. Harrison Butker missed an extra point, which I know we all like to say preseason doesn't really matter that much. Players can make mistakes, but I feel like for a kicker, making kicks is pretty straightforward.
Well, he's a kicker that's continuing the same problems that he's had in the regular season.
Regardless if it's a preseason game or a regular season game. Yeah. Go ahead.
Kicking a football is kicking a football. Like, it's not like he was kicking against the number twos.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, kicking a football is like pretty straightforward, regardless if it's a preseason game or a regular season game. And you don't want to see Harrison Butker missing extra points. And so I said I was pretty frustrated with Butker last year. He nearly cost us the Cleveland playoff game. At some point, these missed extra points are going to start costing us games. And he's got to fix that.
What do you think Baltimore would say if we said, like, hey, Butker and a third for Tucker?
I think they would say no. Actually, you know what? A third round kick for a swap of kickers. You know what? I don't know. Maybe
would you do that?
I wouldn't do that, but I mean, that's
Or how about this? Machole and Butker.
No, I'm not.
Two birds, one stone.
No, I still look. Machole, he drives me insane, but like we need his explosive plays still for this offense.
It's kind of reminding me of like the mentality of Marcus Peters towards the end, where it's like, yeah, he's a head case, but he's still a really good player. Obviously, it was to more of an extreme with Marcus Peters, but eventually you just have to acknowledge when a player's trash, and Machole's that.
Well, I don't know. I feel like trash is a little harsh considering Marcus Peters is still a good cornerback. I just think.
Well, Marcus Peters was never trash.
Just the whole. I mean, it was a bad marriage or a marriage that went wrong. So that's kind of what the Marcus Peters thing was. But with Hardman, I mean, I still want him. I want him to be good because it's good for the Chiefs if he's good. And I just think that even if he's still frustrating and he stays what he has been for the past 2 years, we still need that production for this offense because the guys behind him don't have that same ability. And like, I still want Machole to have his handful of deep plays that get us a touchdown when we need them, even if he is frustrating in his other half of the snaps.
I don't. Get rid of him. I'm tired of him. Bring in like Golden Tate and see what Cornell Powell can do.
Well, hopefully we can see what Cornell Powell can do next game. Also, but you know what? Right, real quick before we wrap up. Now that we're talking about receivers, someone that I would love to see them target, who we've seen some chatter about, is James Washington from the Steelers. I've always been a fan of him.
There's some chatter with us about James Washington.
Well, I mean, when he requested a trade, obviously, the Chiefs people started talking about him like they do with every trade target and stuff. But then Des Bryant tweeted something about him going to the Chiefs and how it would be game over for everyone else, which, I mean, I don't agree with, because James Washington is not an all-world player, but he is a decent player. I feel
I'll take Des Bryant over Machole.
Okay. Now this is when we have to shut off the podcast.
I'm serious.
You would not take Dez over Machole, even though Machole.
I'd take most receivers over Machole. Who are the wide receivers on the free agent market? Golden Tate, take him over Machole. Larry Fitzgerald, I'll take whatever Larry Legend has left.
Jeez.
I think Alshon Jeffrey's out there. That's probably pushing it, but.
Well, as our Machole Hardman hate podcast comes to a close here,
we didn't even say a word about who.
Because he didn't do
This
anything.
is the first time we haven't done it.
We're not, you know what? Let's keep it that way. I'm not bringing him up. Don't say his name.
We've had Mizzou
We're
podcasts
done. We're done.
Him up and we didn't.
We're done. We're not bringing him up. Thanks everyone for listening. Make sure you check out our work on showmefootball.com. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe so more Chiefs fans can find this, and we'll catch y'all later. Peace.